So in this video I will show you how to turn your Moog Grandmother or Matriarch into a note probability generator. Now I'll explain that in full in just a second, but it is easy to do and I think it's a lot of fun. Now one of the main uses for this would be if you are interested in generative. One of the main uses for this would be if you are interested in generative music, and I'll say just a bit more about that in a second. But it also has other applications, because a little later in the video I'm going to play a little game with you. I hope you don't mind, which I think you might find interesting, certainly, and hopefully a little bit of fun as well. But as well as generative music, you can also use this process to create more interesting or more melodic, shall we say, bass lines and toppings or sprinklies or sparklies or ear candy. So let's start with generative music. This is simply where you set up a patch on a synthesizer which will then create or generate music on its own. It is great fun. Now, many hardware synthesizers can do this to a greater or lesser degree, generally to a far lesser degree. If you want to create generative music, then the way to go is with a modular system. Now, the Grandmother and Matriarch are semi-modular synths. The Grandmother is monophonic, so there is a limit to how much interesting music it can generate on its own. But it can certainly be used to generate, shall we say, a harmonic or melodic line, which could be used in conjunction with other semi-modular or modular synthesizers. So what is a note probability generator? Well, let's head over to Grandma and I shall explain. So for this example, I'm going to keep the sound fairly simple. This is a pretty bland synth sound. I'm only using one oscillator, so you can really hear what's happening to the notes as they are played. It's a plucky sort of sound with a little bit of release. So if you want to make generative music on the Grandmother, your first stop is probably going to be the random function. So let's just set up a simple arpeggio. And flip it over to random. Now that sort of sounds all right, but if you just listen to it for a second or two, it does sound random. Of course, yes, because all the system is doing is just taking each note that you have played and playing it back in a random order. So it's quite difficult to get a sense of tonality or harmonic progression or any sort of note preference. Now obviously this does depend as well on which notes you play. If you only play the notes of a C, of a triad, of a C minor chord in this case, then you are obviously only going to hear a C minor chord. However, it's not very interesting as far as generative music it goes. So if you want a bit of a primer on the Moog Grandmother arpeggiator, I have another video which I shall link to up there somewhere, and there'll be a link in the description. And as well as explain exactly what the arpeggiator is and how it works and what it does, and there are a few hints and tips on how you might use it to produce better, shall we say, more tuneful arpeggios. So can we do something better than this with the Grandmother, or the Matriarch in fact? Yes, we can, by using the sequencer. With an arpeggio, each note has an equal chance of sounding when the function is set to random. Obviously, this creates a sort of random output. Now, what we can do with the sequencer is give different notes a different probability of sounding. In the Eurorack world, there are sequences which will generate notes, but you can set them to occur with a certain probability. So In the scale of C, for example, you might have C to occur 25% of the time, G 20%, E 20%, what's that, 65, and then add some of the other notes which are less prevalent, shall we say, in a piece which was going to occur in C, with different probabilities. So we can set this up quite easily and quite simply with the sequencer. All we do is play each note a number of times according to the probability with which you would like it to occur. So, for example, if we want to play something in the key of C, we might want more C's than anything else. So let's hit the C note. And that was about 12 times, I think. And the G, and let's go minor. I like minor arpeggio, so we'll hit the E flat. So there we are. So we have now played each of the notes with a different number of times. So when we hit random, this will increase or decrease the chances of each note being played. So let's see what this sounds like. Now, just for comparison, I shall stop that. Let's flip to sequence 2. We'll enter another sequence, again just using the notes in the C harmonic minor scale. So this is how the arpeggiator would interpret those notes. And we'll flip back to our note probability setting. And back again to the original. And back to the probability settings. Stop that. So you can probably hear that certain notes, obviously the C and the G and the E flat, are being played more often than the other notes. It gives it a greater sense of tonality, if you like. So it is still random, but it is less random than the pure 100% random that you get from the random setting here. So you can, of course, create your own set of probabilities. Let's try to create a bit of a baseline. So I've no idea what this will sound like. Probably terrible. Let's have a listen. Switch it down. So I say it's a baseline because there are fewer notes in it, but of course it doesn't necessarily have to have fewer notes in it. So I think that sounds a little bit bassy, and it sounds less random than purely hitting those notes and letting the random function have a go at them. So easy to do, but I think it can be very effective at producing more harmonic and melodic music lines. As I said, less random than 100% random. So one interesting thing you can do with this is to record a tune into the sequencer and then play it back randomly. And what this does is to effectively analyze the tune and play each note back with the same probability that it occurs in the tune itself. Now, just as a little example of the sort of things this can produce, I have recorded 3 little tunes or pieces of tunes in the Grandmother, and what I propose to do, if you are game, is to play the randomized versions of these tunes and see if you can guess what the original tune is. Now, this is not in any way, shape or form a test of your musicianship or musical ability. It is simply a bit of fun which you might enjoy. It's a little bit like being given a series of words and you have to arrange them into a well-known phrase or saying. I think it's easier with words than it is with music, but here are 3 short examples of what you can do, so let me know what you think. Right, so here is the randomized version of this one. And what's quite interesting, I'm just listening to this as it's playing, it is actually playing a few 2 or 3 notes which actually come from the piece, such as the vagaries of randomness. So I suspect you might be able to guess what this is. If you need a clue, it is one of the most famous pieces of organ music ever written. If you need another clue, it is by J.S. Bach. And we'll flip this over to see what the original sounds like. There we go. Yes, it is from his Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Good. Right, let's try this one. Okay, I'm not sure about a clue for this one. I'm not actually hearing any little snippets from the original PCL, although they will undoubtedly be there. There aren't many notes in it. You can probably tell by listening to it that it is a pentatonic scale. It's by a Russian composer, and it's one of a number of shorter pieces in a larger work. So I'll just say pictures at an exhibition. You can hear 2 or 3 notes sometimes coming together. So let's flip this over and see what the original sounds like. So there we go. It's the Promenade from Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. I'm not sure if that was easy or not. Okay, here we go. So there are the odd couple of notes from the original coming through. I think it's not particularly easy, so I'll give you a few clues. It's classical. It's by Beethoven. It is from one of his symphonies. Okay, let's flip this over and see what it is. Takes a while to catch up. There we are. It's from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy. There we go. So what did you think of that? Let me know in the comments. So what the system is essentially doing is seeing how often each note occurs in the piece and then playing it back with that degree of probability. Now this idea is by no means new. You may well have come across it before. If I may be permitted, this book has made a number of appearances on this channel. It was written in 1984, so that is almost 40 years ago. But one of the programs in this book analysed the tune to see how often a particular note appeared in it and then played it back in a random order but based on the frequency of each note. So the program was essentially doing what the Grandmother and Matriarch are doing using this particular setup. Now, even though this is from almost 40 years ago, I have a feeling that this idea was probably not my own original idea. I think I probably got it from an article I read somewhere. I have always been interested in computers and I guess artificial intelligence. Now, I don't think artificial intelligence really was a thing back then, but computers were excellent at analysing and manipulating data, and essentially that's all that this program did, and that is essentially what the Grandmother and Matriarch are doing using this system. So there you are, your very own note probability generator. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you try it. Let me know what you think of the idea. Let me know if you produce any interesting patterns. One final thing I would say is if you are using this as a means to generate musical ideas, then you really should connect it to your DAW or record the output, because it is random at the end of the day and you may not get the same sequence of notes more than once. So if you hear something that you like, it may possibly disappear forever. Comments are always welcome and I will do my best to answer any questions and reply to them as soon as I can. So if you've enjoyed this video and found it interesting, hopefully useful, you might want to consider subscribing to the channel, ringing the bell. Thank you, so you get informed of new videos as soon as I release them, and of course clicking the big thumb also helps too. As always, I really do appreciate you spending time with me, watching my videos, listening to my music, and in this case a little bit of a tutorial. So for that, thank you very much indeed, and I will see you in the next one.